But the main reason I'm here is to clear my name that I have nothing to do with Bitcoin, nothing to do with developing. I was just an engineer doing something else.
Okay.
And if you look at the time span, 2001, when it was supposed to be developed, I wasn't there. I was working for the government through a contracting company. That's not me.
Okay.
I never communicated with Bitcoins.
Okay.
Leah wrote all this?
Yeah.
2010 to 2000. I was at home.
Okay.
I wasn't working for anybody.
Okay.
I just believe that somebody put that fictitious name in there.
Mm-hmm.
Satoshi Nakamoto and Bitcoin, or Bitcoin.
Do you think?
What is this? What does this tell you? What does this tell you that these exchanges are relisting XRP?
That's bullish for XRP. Looks like the lawsuit's going to work out.
The lawsuit is work. I never imagined. I'm so shocked by this.
Yeah.
That the government would not do a better job picking their judge. Yeah. Like, it all boils down to this judge. She hates the SEC.
Yeah.
So it's definitely super bullish for XRP. And I'm telling you guys, I am loading up on this thing. When this thing pops, when this thing runs, when it explodes, it is going to be something to watch. It's going to be an XRP-plosion, an XR-plosion. How about that? So the SEC and Ripple are going back and forth. Well, that's caused a lot of downward momentum for XRP. A lot of exchanges delisted it because of that reason, because it's basically in limbo right now. But, and I was very ardent, like, this had a good chance to destroy XRP because the government doesn't really lose. But somehow it looks like that the judge in the case is actually leaning towards Ripple and giving them the favorable judgment. We have a lot of evidence to suggest that. So what this means is there's been a lot of like bottled up pressure for XRP ever since this was announced in December. And while other coins like Ethereum and Bitcoin were exploding, you couldn't even really trade XRP places. So now places are starting to put it back on the exchange and it's really bubbling up. And if they get that favorable judgment, the price is going to absolutely explode and go past all-time highs. So that's that's what we're seeing with XRP.
Say you had 10 grand to put all in on one project for the rest of this cycle. What's your pick, Ben?
Ooh, I am going to. That is a tough question because there's so many good ones. But if you were to really break down, I tell you what, I'm going to go a little off the wall here. I'm going to drive TJ crazy here.
Oh no!
I mean, I'm just saying, like, if I had $10,000 and I wanted to do a super risky play,
yeah,
but something that I could ride out with that would have massive gains, I mean, XRP. I mean, if they're able to shake this SEC lawsuit, you look at the upside for what's going to happen when that floodgate were to break. I mean, it also, like Stellar and like Litecoin, hasn't even come close to touching its all-time highs. Mm-hmm. It's actually lagging far behind those. Right. Only at about 50% of its all-time high or so. So XRP would be a one, but it's risky because if the SEC lawsuit goes the other way, obviously it'll get crushed.
Right.
What we see, for instance, in the APAC region, everyone wants to start an e-wallet. The biggest issue is not starting an e-wallet. The biggest issue that a shop accepts your e-wallet and getting that access points across the globe. Because, let's be honest, someone has an e-wallet because they want to pay. And if you only have one store, nobody's going to use it. And it's the same thing, I think, from a blockchain and a payment perspective, is you have to have enough contributors to really make a dent and make the change happening. And then that's, I think, what you'll see is like the central banks are trying, really hard to initiate blockchain projects, etc., but get everyone involved. And as long as it's only one party doing it, it's not going to happen. It needs to be multiple parties across. So you have like what we call in Singapore, we have Project Ubin, which is MIS, but there's also blockchain projects in other countries like Canada. Everyone is looking at it, but again, it's really needs to come driven by the industry. And that's really also why Swift has been so successful, because all the banks own Swift, and it's a global standard which is happening. And then Ripple, of course, coming in with their own current cryptocurrency and their own blockchain. It really is how many parties can you get onto the chain, because that's really happened. It's like, how do I connect to you? And it's the same. That's why corresponding banking, 40 years, 30 years ago was developed, because I would like to pay you, but I don't have a direct connectivity with you. So it's really out of information.
Right. So it's sort of like that, a race to just see how quickly, one sort of platform can get to all of these different banks. And then, I guess after a certain point, then the rest of the banks will have to sort of follow suit because everybody's using it.
Exactly.
Gentlemen, Alexander, this isn't your first foray into crypto. Of course, you had a deal with Ripple. Is this a replacement of that? That deal has fallen apart, I guess. Is this a replacement of that deal?
Not really at all. What we were doing with Ripple was very different. And actually, we were looking at Ripple and utilization of their ODL product and RippleNet to think about the actual flow of the funds, right? With what we're doing with Neil and CoinMe, this is much more about moving fiat into the CoinMe wallet, if you will, and then allowing consumers to buy Bitcoin once it's in the CoinMe network. After that, they can obviously trade Bitcoin, do what they want with Bitcoin, and then if they want cash back, they can actually then sell that in the CoinMe network and then pull that out in cash into the MoneyGram network and into your pocket. So from that perspective, it's totally varying. It's unfortunate what happened with Ripple. It was a great pilot for us and really moved us, I think, progressively forward in blockchain and sort of what was happening in the crypto world. And obviously with the challenges that they're facing today with the SEC and government regulation, which continues to be a big topic in the crypto space, it made it very difficult to continue to operate, particularly in the United States. But we'll see where that goes down the road. And I do think that there is a continued future and an opportunity in blockchain and perhaps in crypto as well, in terms of ledgers and movements and settlement and flow of funds.
To accept Elon's endorsements in terms of accepting it for payment and putting it on the balance sheet, what do you think now? And what do you think occurred to him? It just suddenly, because he knew all along all these things, and suddenly he's on Saturday Night Live 1 second, and then a couple of days later, he drops this bombshell. What do you think is happening?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. Look, I think that we've got to just kind of stick to the facts, right? And I always say, don't listen to what they're saying, just watch what they're doing. Elon Musk.
Financial services is about safe and efficient payments, facilitating money going from saving into lending and investment, but also to facilitate, manage and channel risks.
The world of financial infrastructures has changed tremendously. The embracement of cloud technology, the embracement of artificial intelligence to do even more with the data that we have is already taking place at rapid speed.
The global financial system is undergoing a profound transformation, driven by regulatory change, monetary policy, technological change, and shifts in customer habits and needs. This opens up a set of opportunities and challenges.
The real challenge is not technology as such, it's the change in business models. The regulation cannot keep up with the rapid pace of innovation.
Banks at the same time face an economic environment which is very different than pre-crisis. We found that the other period, which looks mostly like our current period, is the period around the Great Depression. So it's important to ask oneself, how long are interest rates going to stay low?
Because then you get low interest rates, not just for short maturities, but also for medium and long maturities. It really undermines the business model of banks.
They need to get their costs down. So the banks are automating the back end, which reduces mistakes. They're offering more self-service opportunities to the clients, and at the same time exploring the ability for you to buy online.
Inclusive finance is a must, and innovation will help the customer to access financial services in a different way.
I think we're going to see more fragmented financial service industry in the future, more tech firms going into financial services.
We're seeing new players in everything from payments to wealth advisory to trade finance.
Those that can provide the best service and experience to the ultimate client should be the winners.
The public sector has to think about whether they need to sort of upgrade their offer to society.
But I wonder if we have a clear enough framework for the clients to understand how safe their data is and how safe their wealth is in different environments.
In our Global Financial Council, we have practitioners, regulators, academia, central banks. So it's a think tank that can really work in an unconstrained environment together.
We have further developed these views into a report on the future of the global financial system. This will allow leaders to better navigate a very complex environment.
There's a chart I saw recently that I can't get out of my head. A Harvard business professor and economist asked more than 5,000 Americans how they thought wealth was distributed in the United States. This is what they said they thought it was. Dividing the country into 5 rough groups of the top, bottom, and middle 3 20% groups, they asked people how they thought the wealth in this country was divided. Then he asked them what they thought was the ideal distribution. And 92%, that's at least 9 out of 10 of them, said it should be more like this. In other words, more equitable than they think it is. Now that fact is telling, admittedly, the notion that most Americans know that the system is already skewed unfairly. But what's most interesting to me is the reality compared to our perception. The ideal is as far removed from our perception of reality as the actual distribution is from what we think exists in this country. So ignore the ideal for a moment. Here's what we think it is again. And here is the actual distribution. Shockingly skewed. Not only do the bottom 20% and the next 20%, the bottom 40% of Americans barely have any of the wealth. I mean, it's hard to even see them on the chart. But the top 1% has more of the country's wealth than 9 out of 10 Americans believe the entire top 20% should have. Mind-blowing. But let's look at it another way, because I find this chart kind of difficult to wrap my head around. Instead, let's reduce the 311 million Americans to just a representative 100 people. Make it simple. Here they are: teachers, coaches, firefighters, construction workers, engineers, doctors, lawyers, some investment bankers, a CEO, maybe a celebrity or two. Now let's line them up according to their wealth. Poorest people on the left, wealthiest on the right, just a steady row of folks based on their net worth. We'll color code them like we did before based on which 20% quintile they fall into. Now let's reduce the total wealth of the United States, which was roughly $54 trillion in 2009, to this symbolic pile of cash. And let's distribute it among our 100 Americans. Well, here's socialism, all the wealth of the country distributed equally. We all know that won't work. We need to encourage people to work and work hard to achieve that good old American dream and keep our country moving forward. So, here's that ideal we asked everyone about. Something like this curve. This isn't too bad. We've got some incentive, as the wealthiest folks are now about 10 to 20 times better off than the poorest Americans. But hey, even the poor folks aren't actually poor, since the poverty line has stayed almost entirely off the chart. We have a super healthy middle class with a smooth transition into wealth. And yes, Republicans and Democrats alike chose this curve. 9 out of 10 people, 92%, said this was a nice, ideal distribution of America's wealth. But let's move on. This is what people think America's wealth distribution actually looks like. Not as equitable, clearly, but for me, even this still looks pretty great. Yes, the poorest 20 to 30% are starting to suffer quite a lot compared to the ideal, and the middle class is certainly struggling more than they were, while the rich and wealthy are making roughly 100 times that of the poorest Americans, and about 10 times that of the still healthy middle class. Sadly, this isn't even close to the reality. Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change, and the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. This is the top 1% we've been hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own, because he won't fit on my chart. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. The bottom 80%, 8 out of every 10 people, or 80 out of these 100, only has 7% between them. And this has only gotten worse in the last 20 to 30 years. While the richest 1% take home almost a quarter of the national income today, in 1976 they took home only 9%, meaning their share of income has nearly tripled in the last 30 years. The top 1% own half the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The bottom 50% of Americans own only 0.5% of these investments, which means they aren't investing. They're just scraping by. I'm sure many of these wealthy people have worked very hard for their money, but do you really believe that the CEO is working 380 times harder than his average employee? Not his lowest paid employee, not the janitor, but the average earner in his company. The average worker needs to work more than a month to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour. We certainly don't have to go all the way to socialism to find something that is fair for hardworking Americans. We don't even have to achieve what most of us consider might be ideal. All we need to do is wake up and realize that the reality in this country is not at all what we think it is.